Now, while we're on the subject of text formats, I'd like to address fonts. Now, I'm sure most of you know how fonts work inside of the Flash movie file. Let's kind of go over the base properties of static versus dynamic text when it comes to fonts. Now, I'm just going to close my Actions panel down here a little bit. I'll just click on a piece of text on the screen just so I can see the settings down in here. In general, you can choose any font that's on your system. And as you probably know, if you've got a static text field, Flash will automatically embed those font shapes inside your Swift movie file for the users to play back, so they don't need to have the font there on their machine in order to see it. Now, when you're dealing with dynamic text, it doesn't automatically embed the fonts, but you can choose to embed them in the Properties window by clicking on the Embed button and then choosing what elements of the font that you'd like to have embedded. Now, the particular one I have here, Verdana, actually has Japanese and Korean and Chinese characters, so I might do something like this. I might set up all the uppercase and lowercase characters, and maybe the numerals if I wanted them, possibly the punctuation, and I could pick out which characters would be embedded. The base difference here between static and dynamic, the Flash program doesn't necessarily know which characters you're going to be using because the whole purpose of dynamic text is to be able to change them during the playback of your movie file. Now, in general, even if you're using the property window, it's a good idea to embed your fonts once, and that way you don't have to worry about them later on using your file. So to use special fonts in a dynamic text field, you will need to set the embedding of the fonts, and we can do that via ActionScript. What we'll also want to do, though, is make sure that the fonts are already included in the movie file. Remember, our ActionScript doesn't really kick in until after the movie starts playing. So let's deal with the font issue first, and then we'll deal with the issue of setting the ActionScript so our dynamic text fields will be embedded with the fonts properly. I'll just hit Cancel here. Now, what I'm going to do first of all is I'm going to place a font into the library so that it's stored with the movie file. We can do that out of the Library panel options. I'm going to go up here to the top right corner of the Library panel, and you'll notice here at the top of my settings I've got New Symbol, New Folder, and New Font. We'll just choose New Font, and I can pick out any font that's installed on my system. Now, we probably don't have the same font, so you can pick out whatever font you like. I'm going to grab Century Gothic from mine. Notice I can pick out a size. I can also add bold and italic if we'd like to. I'm going to leave bold on for mine because we were using bold for our featured flowers. And I think I was using size 12, so I'll go ahead and type that in. Now, you should be able to change size around because this is a vector shape that we're pulling in here. Also, give this whatever name you'd like. I'll just call this one Century Gothic so I know which font it's referring to. To make sure it conforms to our naming requirements, I'm going to take out the space and have it all be one word. But otherwise, we'll just drop it right into our folder. Now you can see it shows up here as a font with a new icon and with the name Century Gothic. Now let me point out just one thing about the library. Again, you probably already know this. If you've got elements in your library that are not used in your movie file, they won't be included in the SWF, and this is generally done to save space. In our case right now, that would actually cause a problem because we've gone to all the trouble of putting this font into our library, but if we don't use it in the movie, it won't be included in the SWF file automatically. We're going to be adding ActionScript to use that font, but once again, that ActionScript is not going to be taken into account until it actually starts running and executing, which is way after we've made the SWF file. So whenever you have elements in the library that you want to make sure they're included, we're going to do one more step to add them to our SWF file manually. I'm going to click on the font that we just made, go back up to the options up in here, and I'm going to select Linkage. Now with linkage, what we're basically saying is we would like this font exported along with the rest of the SWF file, and you can see we've got a couple of reasons for doing it. I'm going to click on Export for ActionScript. The second checkbox comes up and it makes sure that this font is available in the first frame, and if you think about it, that's where our ActionScript is that's going to be using this font, so we want to make sure it's right there. Now just like every other object that ActionScript is dealing with, it needs some kind of a name to identify it. By default, it takes the name of the library item and drops it into the identifier, and I'm going to leave it as that. You can change it if you want to, but since I set the name up properly to begin with, we've got a proper identifier for this one. I'll just click OK. Now, whenever we export our movie out into a SWF, that font will be included in with the other elements that we've got in our library that we're using. Now we've really just got one step left. We've got to make sure that each one of our text fields that's going to use this font has the embed font option set to true, and we simply have to include this font in our text format style. So let's go back into our Actions panel and let's set that up. First of all, I'm going to add the font to my feature definition. We've already got bold color and size. I'll just add a line here at the top and we'll add in font. I'll set it equal to Century Gothic. That's the name that we gave it in the identifier. Now I'm going to test the movie right at this point to show that we probably won't see that font appearing on any of our format fields because we haven't set these fields to properly embed the fonts. So let's go make that change. I'm going to go right before we set the new text format, and I'm going to add a line for each one of the featured text fields. We'll start with the first one, MC Home, Text Flower 1, and we're going to use the embed fonts property. This is a Boolean, so we'll just set it equal to true. And I'll copy that so we can quickly set up our other text fields. There's one for 2 and 3. We'll change the names. And let's test our movie and see how that's applied. And there you can see our Century Gothic font used correctly for each one of our text fields.